This is the kind of testimony that breaks through every wall of unbelief and reveals the unshakable, mysterious love of Jesus. When human effort failed, when doctors could not help and false beliefs gave up, heaven itself responded to a simple cry of faith. In one holy moment, after 7 long years of pain, shame, and hopelessness, Jesus stepped into a woman's life and turned her story into a living miracle. How can anyone deny such power? This was no coincidence, no trick of emotion. This was the touch of a Savior who still heals, still saves, and still answers those who call on His name. What medicine could not do, what prayer by tradition could not achieve, one whisper, "Jesus, help me," accomplished completely. The bleeding stopped, the bondage broke, and a heart once filled with despair was restored to peace. Beloved, this is more than a story, it is a divine invitation. As you follow this testimony, open your heart and reflect deeply. Join this community of faith-filled believers, share your thoughts, and let your spirit be stirred. For the same Jesus who healed Hadiza still moves today, reaching those who dare to believe, comforting those who have lost hope, and proving again that His love has no limits. My name is Hadiza. I was born and raised in a quiet town in Tunisia, where life moved slowly under the warm desert sun. My husband, Kareem, was a respected imam in our community. We lived peacefully, guided by our faith and traditions. But one morning, my life changed in a way I could never have imagined. It started with a small pain in my stomach, then came bleeding. At first, I thought it was normal, something that would stop in a few days. But days became weeks, and weeks became months. I tried every kind of medicine known to us. I visited doctors, herbalists, and old women who knew secret cures passed down from generation to generation. Still, the bleeding continued. The days turned into years. My strength slowly left me. I could no longer cook for my children or join my husband at the mosque. My skin became pale and my body weak. Every time I looked into the mirror, I saw a stranger, a shadow of the woman I used to be. The smell of blood filled my home. It made me cry in silence at night when everyone else was asleep. People began to whisper. Some said I was cursed. Others said an evil spirit had attacked me. My husband fasted and prayed many times, calling upon Allah for mercy. Imams came to our home, reciting verses and praying loudly, but nothing changed. I remember one of them shaking his head sadly and saying, "This sickness is beyond us." By the 7th year, I had almost lost all hope. I often sat by the window watching the world outside. Children laughed and played. Women went to the market, carrying baskets of fruit. I wanted to live again, to be free from the shame and pain that chained me every single day. That was when something unexpected entered my life, something that would change everything I ever believed. One hot afternoon, I was lying on my bed, too weak to stand. The radio played softly beside me. It was my only comfort in those lonely hours. Usually, I listened to songs or news from nearby cities, but that day, the radio caught a strange signal. The sound was faint at first, then clearer. It was a voice speaking about hope, peace, and healing, things I had long stopped believing in. The man on the radio spoke gently, unlike the loud preachers I had known. His words touched something deep inside me. I couldn't explain why, but I felt warmth in my chest as he talked. He spoke about a man called Jesus, someone who loved people so deeply that he gave his own life for them. I had heard his name before, but never like this. In my world, Jesus was only known as a prophet, not as a healer or savior. As I listened, the man told a story of another woman, one who had been bleeding for 12 years, just like me. My eyes widened. My heart began to beat fast. How could this be? A woman with the same kind of suffering as mine? The voice said that when she reached out and touched Jesus, her bleeding stopped instantly. I froze. My mind raced. Could this Jesus still heal people today? Was this story even real? I wanted to turn off the radio, but something in me said, "Keep listening." The man on the radio then said he would pray for anyone who was sick. He said that Jesus still heals, even when doctors and people give up. I closed my eyes. Tears filled them before I knew it. I whispered, if only someone could pray for me too. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd be truly honored to have you join this growing family of faith and reflection. Every new heart adds something beautiful to our community. As you listen to this powerful testimony of transformation, we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. Share where you're watching from and what stands out to you in this journey. Your thoughts and reflections aren't just comments. They help shape a genuine dialogue around experiences that have the power to change lives. Then, something unusual happened. It was as if a quiet whisper entered my heart, not from the radio, not from outside, but from deep within. It was peaceful and gentle, like a soft wind. It made me stop crying for a moment. I didn't understand what it was, but I knew something unseen was trying to reach me. That night, I could not sleep. The man's words kept echoing in my mind. For the first time in 7 years, I felt a spark of hope. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of my journey toward a miracle I could never have imagined. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The call to prayer echoed through the still air, but I could not join my husband in the usual morning routine. My body was weak, yet my heart was restless. I kept thinking about the voice I heard on the radio the day before. Something about it had stayed with me through the night, like a candle that refused to go out, even in the dark. I turned the radio on again, hoping to hear that same voice. The station was hard to find, but after some time, I caught it again. The same man was speaking. This time, he was talking about faith. He said faith was like a seed that grows when you water it with trust and hope. He spoke about Jesus again, saying that he listens to the cries of those who are in pain, no matter who they are or where they come from. As I listened, my tears began to fall again. I whispered softly, if this Jesus really listens, then maybe he can hear me too. My voice trembled. I had never prayed in any name other than Allah. But something deep in my soul urged me to try. I was afraid of doing something wrong, afraid of being rejected. But I was more afraid of living the rest of my life in suffering. That afternoon, I sat by the window, looking at the dusty streets and the children playing outside. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the exact words the man had used when praying on the radio. I didn't know how to pray like that, but I tried anyway. My lips trembled as I whispered, Jesus, if you can hear me, help me. At first, nothing happened. The room was silent. I thought maybe I had done something foolish. But then, suddenly, a feeling like warm oil ran through my body from my head down to my feet. It wasn't frightening, it was peaceful, calm, and strong. My heart began to beat quickly. My hands shook. And then I realized, the bleeding had stopped. I sat there in silence, afraid to move. I waited a few minutes, then an hour. I checked again. It was truly gone. After 7 years of pain, suffering, and shame, it was gone. My body felt light, like the heavy burden I had carried for so long had been lifted. I began to cry loudly, not out of sadness but out of joy and wonder. I didn't know how to explain it, but deep in my heart, I knew this was no accident. Someone had touched me, someone I had never seen but who knew me better than anyone ever could. That night, for the first time in many years, I slept peacefully, knowing that something holy had entered my life. When I woke up the next morning, the sunlight streamed gently through the window, brighter than I remembered. For a moment, I lay still, afraid that if I moved, everything that happened the night before might disappear like a dream. But when I sat up and looked at myself, I realized it was real. The bleeding was still gone. My body felt strong, my mind clear, and my heart full of peace I had never known before. I got out of bed slowly and walked to the kitchen. My husband, Kareem, was sitting there, reading. When he saw me standing, he froze. His eyes widened in surprise because for years, I had not been able to stand for long without pain or weakness. He asked, Hadiza, are you all right? His voice trembled slightly. I nodded and said softly, I am fine, Kareem. The bleeding has stopped." He looked at me in disbelief. "How?" he asked. "What did you do?" I told him everything, about the radio, the man who spoke about Jesus, and how I whispered his name in prayer. As I spoke, tears filled my eyes. My husband listened silently, his face unreadable. When I finished, he stood up and paced around the room, deep in thought. Finally, he said, "Hadiza, do you understand what you are saying? You prayed in the name of Jesus. You know what that means for us." I nodded quietly. "I know," I said. "But Kareem, he heard me. He healed me when nothing else could." He didn't answer. For the rest of the day, he avoided speaking about it. I didn't blame him. He was an imam, a leader in the mosque. He had prayed for me for 7 years, and yet healing had come in a way that challenged everything we had been taught. That night, I sat alone again, thinking. I felt a strange mixture of peace and fear. I knew what had happened to me was real, but I also knew it would not be easy to explain or accept. Still, deep in my heart, I couldn't deny the truth. Something powerful had touched my life, something that no human could have done. In the stillness of that night, as I sat by the window looking up at the stars, I felt a quiet presence near me. It was gentle, peaceful, and comforting. I could not see anyone, but it was as if someone stood beside me. Deep inside, I understood. He was letting me know that I was not alone anymore. In the days that followed, the joy of my healing began to mix with confusion and fear. Word of my sudden recovery spread quickly through the neighborhood. Women came to see me, touching my hands, asking what medicine I had used. Some thought I had gone to a new doctor, others whispered that a spirit might have taken pity on me. I smiled, but deep inside I knew the truth. Still, I didn't know how to explain it without causing trouble. Kareem, my husband, avoided the topic of my healing at first. He continued to lead prayers at the mosque, but I could see the questions in his eyes whenever he looked at me. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, he sat beside me and said, "Hadiza, I've been thinking about what you said. About the radio, about this name you called on. I don't understand it." I looked at him and said gently, "I don't understand everything either, Kareem. But I know this, when I whispered that name, something happened. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was love, a love that reached me when no one else could." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "If this is true, then everything we believe must be questioned." I could hear the struggle in his voice. He had spent his life teaching others about faith and obedience. Now, his wife was standing before him, healed by a power he had never known. Days turned into weeks. I started to feel stronger, walking to the market, cooking for my family, laughing again. My neighbors couldn't hide their amazement. Some said, "Hadiza, your God must have visited you." Their words made me think deeply. Maybe he really had. One afternoon, I tuned into the radio again. The same voice was speaking about forgiveness and new life in Jesus. As I listened, I felt peace wash over me once more. I realized I wanted to know more about this Jesus, not just the story of what he did, but who he really was. That night, when everyone was asleep, I prayed again. This time, it wasn't just for healing. I said quietly, "If you truly are who they say you are, show me who you are." As I sat in silence, I felt that same gentle presence again, even stronger this time. It was as if he was near, not speaking with words, but letting me know that my heart had finally opened to truth. From that night, I knew my journey was no longer about sickness. It was about discovering the one who had healed me. Weeks passed, and something began to change in our home. The air felt lighter, as if peace had settled quietly over us. My husband, Kareem, though still uncertain, could no longer deny what he saw every day. He saw my energy return, my laughter restored, and my heart filled with calm. I caught him several times watching me quietly, deep in thought. One evening, he came home earlier than usual from the mosque. His face looked troubled but gentle. After dinner, when the children had gone to bed, he said, "Hadiza, I have listened to the same radio station you told me about. My heart jumped. I didn't expect that. He continued, I wanted to hear what they were saying for myself. I thought it would be foolishness, but there was something different. The words touched me. I stayed silent, afraid to interrupt. He looked at me, his eyes soft but searching. The man spoke about love. A love so deep that it forgives even those who hate. He said Jesus came to bring people back to God. It made me think, what kind of man teaches love for enemies? That is not weakness, that is power. For the first time in years, I saw tears in his eyes. Kareem, the strong imam who always hid his emotions, was now shaken by truth. He confessed, I have prayed for your healing for so long, Farisa. I did everything I knew. But it was not until you called on this Jesus that the bleeding stopped. Maybe I need to know him too. That night, for the first time, we prayed together, not in the way we used to, but from our hearts, with simple words. We didn't know the right prayers, but we spoke honestly. Kareem said, God, if you are showing us something new, open our eyes. I said, you healed me, Jesus. Please help my husband see the truth. As we prayed, that same peace filled the room. It was as if an unseen hand touched both of us. I could not see anything, but I felt warmth around us, a holy calmness that wrapped us like light. Kareem later told me that he felt something move in his heart that night, something that made him realize God was real in a way he had never known before. From that evening, we started listening to the Christian radio together every day. Slowly, our hearts opened more and more. The truth was shining brighter, and the more we listened, the more it felt like light had entered our home. In the weeks that followed, our home began to change in quiet but powerful ways. Every morning, before the sun rose, Kareem and I sat together to listen to the radio. The voice we once heard by chance became our daily companion. The speaker often read from a book called the Bible. He spoke of forgiveness, kindness, and a God who desired a close friendship with his people. The more we listened, the more we wanted to understand. Kareem started writing down verses he heard. He said he wanted to compare them with what he had studied all his life. But each time he did, he became silent, lost in thought. One morning, he said to me, Hadiza, I have read many holy words, but none ever spoke directly to my heart like this. When they read about love, it feels alive. Our children noticed the change too. They said we smiled more, argued less, and seemed happier. Even our neighbors began to wonder what had happened to us. I told one of them, peace came to our home, and that was true. It wasn't peace from the world. It was something deeper, stronger, something that stayed even when troubles tried to rise. One night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Kareem sat alone on the mat and prayed quietly. Later, he told me that during that prayer, he felt as if someone was beside him, not frightening but gentle and pure. He said the presence revealed to him that truth was not in traditions or titles but in knowing the living God. He said he understood that Jesus was not only a prophet but the way to real peace with God. The next morning, he told me everything with tears in his eyes. Hadiza, he said, I know now that what healed you was not chance. Jesus reached our home for a reason. He wants us to know him. I cried too because I had felt the same thing but had been afraid to say it aloud. From that day, our lives turned toward a new direction. We prayed together in simple words, asking God to lead us. We no longer prayed from fear but from love. Our hearts were open and our faith, a new faith, had finally awakened. After Kareem and I gave our hearts to this new truth, peace filled our home more deeply than ever. But God's work did not stop with us. Slowly, the light began to reach the rest of our family. My younger sister, Amina, was the first to notice the change. When she visited one afternoon, she said, Hadiza, you look so different, your face shines. I smiled and told her about what had happened, the years of bleeding, the voice on the radio, the prayer, and how Jesus had healed me. She listened quietly, her eyes wide. At first, she didn't believe me. How can this be? She asked. You know what people will say if they hear this. I told her I didn't care anymore because what happened was true. I said, Amina, when everyone gave up on me, he helped me. When no prayer could stop my pain, his name brought peace. She returned home troubled but thoughtful. A few days later, she came back again. She said, Hadiza, I listened to the radio too. I heard the same voice. He spoke about forgiveness, just as you said. That night, Amina prayed in our home with us, asking Jesus to help her understand the truth. I watched as tears fell from her eyes, and peace came over her face just as it had come over mine. Not long after, word spread through the family. My brothers, cousins, even my mother began asking questions. Kareem, once an imam who stood in front of hundreds, now stood before our family and told them everything with humility. He said, I used to think I knew God, but now I know him in a new way. His love is not distant. His presence changes hearts. At first, some were angry. They called us foolish, warned us that we were turning away from our traditions. But others saw the peace and joy in our home, and they could not deny it. My mother said, if this faith brought my daughter back to life, then it must be real. One by one, our family began to open their hearts. We started gathering in our living room each evening, reading from the Bible and praying in simple words. The same house that once echoed with cries of pain now overflowed with laughter, songs, and prayer. Sometimes, when we sat together in the quiet, I would feel that same warm presence again. It was as if he was reminding me that he had not only healed my body but had brought life to an entire family. Not long after our family began to follow this new faith, the peace in our hearts was tested. News of our change spread through the community. Some neighbors stopped greeting us. A few of Kareem's old friends avoided him at the mosque. Others whispered when we passed by. One man even shouted, the Imam has lost his way. It hurt deeply. These were people we had grown up with, shared meals with, and prayed beside. Suddenly they saw us as strangers. My children came home from school one day crying because their friends had called them names. That night, as I held them close, I reminded them gently, when you know the truth, it is worth standing for, even if people do not understand. Kareem faced the hardest test. The elders from the mosque came to question him. They said, is it true you have turned to another faith? Kareem didn't deny it. He spoke calmly and said, I have not turned away from God. I have found him more deeply than before. They were angry and told him he could no longer lead prayers. That evening, he returned home quiet but peaceful. I asked if he was sad, and he said, I have lost a title, but I have found truth, and that is greater. There were days when we felt alone and afraid. Some relatives stopped visiting. But during those times, we prayed more. Every time we prayed, strength filled our hearts again. It was not an easy road, but we began to see that faith is not about comfort. It is about trusting the one who walks with us through every storm. One night, while I was praying, I felt that same holy presence again. It was gentle and full of comfort. In my heart, I understood what he was letting me know, that even when people turn away, he never does. He reminded me that pain could not break what he had already healed inside of me. Soon, others in the village began coming secretly to ask questions. Some came late at night, knocking softly at our door, whispering, tell us more about this peace you found. We welcomed them, shared our story, and prayed with them. Slowly, what began as my personal miracle became a quiet movement of faith in our small town. Through it all, I learned that true faith is not proven when everything is easy, but when you still choose to love, forgive, and trust when life becomes hard. Now, when I look back on all that has happened, the years of pain, the hopeless nights, the sudden healing, and the journey of faith that followed, I see how everything had a purpose. What I once thought was a curse became the road that led me to truth. I understand now that God can use even our deepest suffering to show us His power and love. To every believer who hears my story, I want to speak to your heart. There will be seasons in life when everything feels dark, when prayers seem unanswered, and when people around you don't understand your faith. But remember this: God sees you even in silence. He listens to every whisper, every tear, and every cry that no one else hears. Do not give up. Keep trusting Him, even when you do not understand what He is doing. Faith is not about having everything perfect. It is about holding on to the one who never fails. I have learned that Jesus does not only heal bodies. He heals hearts, families, and even broken souls. He gives peace where there was once fear, and joy where there was sorrow. Love one another, even those who hurt you. Pray for them. I have seen that love has more power to change people than anger ever will. Let your life be a light that shines quietly in dark places. Some may mock you or turn away, but do not lose heart. God works through those who remain faithful.